I'm realizing the path is most clear when we actually allow ourselves to see it. I'm realizing that sometimes in our effort to know our path or know exactly what is yet to come, we lose our ability to actually see the steps that are necessary to get to that point, to actually be at that point. And I think in my own experience, it's been a journey of um, recognizing what's taking away from myself and what's taking away from my experience of my path, of my journey, I think. And I think until we recognize that us and the path are one in that sense, then we really are losing track of where we're going by losing track of who we are, by losing track of ourselves and not allowing newness to be found and newness to be instantiated. I think to a certain extent, we have to give ourselves back to what we're doing. Give ourselves back to the moment enough to actually experience the life that we've been granted, the life that we've been blessed to sort of live in a way. And I think it's about learning your each and every individual lesson. Being present enough and being with yourself enough to not repeat the past in a way. Um, Learning how to utilize who you are, learning how to see who you are enough to allow it to even be utilized in a way. And I think a lot of that comes from the love that we're able to grant ourselves enough to be in the moment without restriction. I think allowing ourselves to be separate from our ego and identity is very important. I think we have to sort of let ourselves be one with the moment to actually see who we are in that moment, to be able to see what steps we want to take in that moment, what steps we need to take in that moment. And I think recognizing that you don't have to condition yourself for your love is important. And recognizing that um, whatever you want to be a part of a situation, event, or even your action has to be placed by you. We have to be the ones that sort of affirm what it is that we do and affirm the one that's doing it first and foremost. I think it's not the path that needs affirmation, it's the self. I think when we have so much perception of who we are and we're so caught up in our own image and caught up on how we look, caught up on how we interact here and what that means for us, we lose our ability to actually take steps because we're so worried about everyone else that's watching the steps we take, ourselves included. I think there's no bigger judge of the self than ourselves. There is no bigger judge of who we are than us. And I think we need to be the ones to sort of dispel that judgment by allowing ourselves to be in a real way. Being open to our experience, being open to receive what we want to receive and what we need to, and not necessarily dampening our ability to receive it through our own ego and perception of what we think is right for us, quote unquote. What I mean by that is sometimes I think we get narcissistic in our heads when it comes to our path, our journey, and we think it has to be a set way. And we sort of get caught up in the fictitious uh, little inklings of light within it. And when I say that, I mean like maybe we look towards the money aspect of it. Maybe we look towards the notoriety of it, or some other variant of that. When it really should just be, I think, tied to a definite purpose. And I don't necessarily think we all need to find our purpose in a sense to be able to walk that path, but I think you need to walk the path to find it and be open enough and aware enough to see it. And I think that's what makes the path more clear is our allowance of sight. It's us actually allowing ourselves to see rather than looking for something. I think he who squints his eyes in search has obscure vision. I think as much as we search for what we're looking for, we lose it. Because I think a lot of times the thing that we're looking for, if we can recognize that the path and us are one, is part of ourselves. And you don't learn about yourself in effort, but in willingness to listen. And your willingness to be where you are, and your willingness to be who you are and be authentic to it through and through. And I'm recognizing that that commitment is sort of the biggest act of self-love that you can give. To be able to live out who you are to your highest potential, highest capability, I think should be a grand objective. Because if you're not doing that, then it's sort of like you're constantly not necessarily letting yourself down, but not doing what you can with what you have. Not expressing yourself or expressing love to yourself to the extent that you can. I think there's a lot of opportunities within the present moment for us to give ourselves a bit of affirmation, for us to allow ourselves to truly be one in what we're doing. And I think it's when we are one in what we're doing that it actually tends to be something beautiful, that it tends to be something that people actually can resonate with and relate to. Because I think the very same part of you that's authentic is the same as theirs. And until we sort of separate ourselves from this constant separation, then we're going to feel divided. We're going to feel like who we are and the path that we walk are two separate things, without recognizing that everything we do is our path. Everything that we tend to is our path. In the same way that everything we do is part of our story. There is no part of your story void of you. There is no part that you don't have an influence in either. I think it's important to pick up the pen sometimes and learn to write certain things into our stories. Not in the sense of just making stuff appear. I don't mean that in any sense, but to recognize that a lot of times change follows change. And sometimes we need to change internally in terms of our perspective of ourselves, in terms of our perspective of the world around us, in order to actually experience a new world, in order to actually live in this new world and sort of break the barrier between what we were and who we are. What we were is just a reference to the past. And I think if we can recognize that a lot of times our past gets misconstrued in present feeling, then we shouldn't always use it as a basis for who we are currently. I think in a lot of ways we need to learn how to base who we are now and who we are now and what we are now and maybe even a little bit of what we tend to be in the future. Not necessarily in the sense to say focus solely on the future, but recognize that the present already exists within the future. The future already exists within the present in a way. Whatever we do in the present moment often tends towards the future that we're going to experience. And that's why I think it's important to invest positivity and love into what is now. Because when you do that, it's sort of like you're giving yourself a real opportunity to exist, to live the life that you're living and love the life that you live. Because it's not going to be in reference to anything but life, but your objective, but what you want. Not necessarily in the sense of like just overt desire, but I think we all have a very innermost thing that we want, whether or not we are aware of it or not aware of it. And I think that sort of thing is only able to be seen as soon as you allow it to. We sort of have to take a step forward from our mind long enough to recognize that we aren't just the thoughts we have about our condition, the thoughts we have about who we are. We're something much more, I think, profound, something much greater. And, the greatest opportunity to see that is within the present, because that's where we're truly unrestricted. That's where we're unbiased. That's when we're granted an opportunity to actually see different ways that things could be and experience those different ways. There's no experience that isn't within the present. You can experience something in past thought, but you're still bringing it to the present. And that's why I think it's important to not live in the past in regards to that, because we're constantly bringing energy from the past and bringing old feelings into new situations. And in that way, they're making them characteristic of the old ones. If we want anything new, then it's about doing new things with what's currently here. Even doing new things with what's currently old. I think a lot of us think our character is a stuck, stagnant thing because we've convinced ourselves that we are a certain way and that thing isn't going to change. And I think that's a whole bunch of baloney. I think we can change as much as we allow ourselves to, as much as we can accept ourselves in changing. Because who you are is really just a result of what you've accepted for yourself, who you've accepted yourself to be, and how you've allowed that to perpetuate into the things that you do. I think a life well lived in a lot of senses is a life full of you, a life where you actually allow yourself to live it rather than just thinking about, the life that you're experiencing and thinking about what this means for this, what this means for that. Instead, it's about, I think, figuring it out, making the path more clear by taking more steps, making the path more clear by opening your eyes to see it. Like actually being able to be there while you're taking steps, be there while you have feelings about what you're doing and recognize that, not allowing yourself to get caught up so much so in the ebbs and flows of everyday life. And I mean that to say sometimes our feelings take us away from the moment, not because We have feelings, but because we fail to acknowledge them in a way that's actually beneficial. I don't think it's about not having feelings, but recognizing that we control our reactions to said feelings. And if we learn to react in a way that actually accommodates us, then our feelings won't take us away from ourselves. They won't make us tend towards negativity. They won't make us tend towards a life that we don't want to live. Instead, they will enforce greater ideas that will allow us to move forward into our future that we want to exist in. It'll be more clear because we're more clear on what we want for ourselves. And that's why I think self love is important. Because once you invest self love in yourself, you're recognizing what it is you want. You're recognizing that you want your experience to be good in virtue of you wanting it to be good for you. And once you do that, then it's about recognizing the opportunities that you have to make it so. And recognizing that the only opportunities that ever exist for us are always within the present moment. So it's really just about being where you are and allowing yourself to be where you are and doing what you can where you are. If you want to love yourself more, quote unquote, and you want to work on your self love, it's about doing it in the present, doing it right now, doing it when you have an opportunity. Sort of not waiting, inviting yourself to the situation, inviting yourself to the life that you're living, and not waiting on something to give you an invitation. We sort of have to be the catalyst for our own change in a lot of senses and changes in our perspective. Sometimes we have to learn to look at ourselves in a good way. Sometimes we have to learn to carry positivity within ourselves before we can see it in the world in abundance. And I don't think that's a negative thing at all. I think that's just the way that things sort of are in a sense. And I think we need to give ourselves a chance to experience that by giving ourselves love that we carry into situations, by giving ourselves enough attention to not perform for everyone around us, but to truly allow ourselves to be as we are and recognize that life is not a performance. Life is you. It's your being. You don't have to be any other way than what you are, but you can if you want to, is what I'm saying. The change that we embark on sometimes happens without our control gradually and over time. And sometimes we can be the catalyst for our own change. And I think we can always be the catalyst for our own change as long as we give ourselves an opportunity to recognize that change happens where you are, not where you're going. As soon as we recognize that you can't heal what you don't acknowledge. If we want to change, we have to be the ones to do it. And I think sometimes that's the most unsettling part of change. I think that's the uncomfortable part of change because a lot of times we don't know what we need to change. We don't know what we want to change. We don't know how we're going to do the things, even if we do know what we want to change. And overall, I'm just recognizing that it's really just about your intention with it. It's about actually being devoted to the change that you want to make and making the choices in the present that align with the change that you want to make, that align with this person that you want to become, that align with the idea that you actually want to put into the world. And I think that's where real creativity flourishes. I think that's when real self flourishes. When we sort of allow ourselves to observe the world rather than constantly observing ourselves in it. It's about sort of not allowing too much separation to be between you and the world. And I don't mean that to say take every situation personally or taking every situation to heart, but recognizing that the situation is always filled with what you bring it as well. And if you can bring it love and positivity that's inherent to your character, then it's going to be present within that moment. If you can bring it to any moment that you're in, then it's just about recognizing that it doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to take away from you. And I mean this especially in cases of our own self-doubt and worry. You don't have to look at it in a way of worry. It doesn't often do anything but promote early suffering. You don't have to do it in a way of fear. Playing life with fear doesn't make it any more avoidable. You don't avoid the things anymore. You just focus so much so on them that you forget to recognize there's other things that could be out to get you, quote unquote. And I don't mean that to say enforce your anxiety over everything, but to recognize the only way you're ever going to confront something you fear is within the present moment. And if you're present enough to see it, then you're present enough to choose your reaction. Then you don't need to fear anything, really. All that to say thank you. I really do appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope you guys are taking care of yourself and doing what you can, what you have. I think it's an important time to sort of um, focus on ourselves, really, and sort of getting gear. Thank you. Keep me all, keep me great. Treat yourself like a friend. Thank you.